And good morning, and thanks for joining us. I'm Morgan Chesky in for Joe Fry.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, final sprint. Key midterm races across the country are heating up with Election Day 3 weeks away. One of the races getting the most attention, Georgia. Senator Raphael Warnock and his GOP opponent, Herschel Walker, faced off in the first debate, and then Walker was a no-show for their second one. We've got the highlights and where the race stands now, plus the role former President Obama is expected to play on the campaign trail over the next few weeks. New attacks this morning in Ukraine's capital of Kyiv. Ukraine says Russia is now using kamikaze drones to hit the city. The new information we're learning this morning about the attacks and the rescue efforts as Ukraine calls for more support from the West. Also this morning, pricey plans. If you're thinking of flying for the holidays, get ready to pay up. It's not just because of inflation. We'll show you why you'll be paying more for airline tickets and how to find the best deal. And on the hunt, it's like Where's Waldo, but for reptiles. A new social media search for lizards, but with some seriously cool reasoning behind it. The creator joins us later this hour to explain. And hint, it's all about access and representation, but it's pretty fun, too.
Yeah, I'm going to be looking forward to that one.
Yeah, I know. It's a cool conversation later on, I promise, and we're happy to have you with us.
Good to be here.
Thanks for filling in today. You also at home on a Monday. We're going to start this morning with midterm elections. Now with control of Congress at stake, this is shaping up to be a pivotal and busy week in several key states.
Yeah, it certainly is. And the focus today is on Georgia, of course. Early voting begins today in that key battleground state. And there's also a debate between the two candidates for governor. And, of course, later this week, early voting will also get underway in North Carolina and Nevada. And with just 22 days to go, there's a lot to dig into. So let's bring in NBC News senior political editor Mark Murray. Mark, good morning.
Good morning.
I want to start with the Georgia Senate race. Democrat incumbent Raphael Warnock facing Republican challenger Herschel Walker. Two debated on Friday, and that definitely made some headlines. But there was another debate yesterday. Walker, a no-show. That race getting a lot of national attention, and the control of the Senate, of course, hangs in the balance. So walk us through where things stand as of now, especially after these last two debates.
Yeah, it is a really close contest, Morgan, and I wouldn't call the Georgia Senate race the most important when it comes to which party ends up controlling the Senate after the November elections, but it's one of the three most important. And the reason I say that is that Senate control really kind of almost hinges right now on which party wins two of the three contests of Georgia, of Pennsylvania, and Nevada. And so you end up having Raphael Warnock the incumbent, and if Democrats are able to win in Georgia and they're able to win in Pennsylvania, they're going to hold on to control of the United States Senate. So Republicans need to basically win Nevada or win one of Pennsylvania or Georgia. And those are the stakes right now. And as I mentioned earlier, the polling indicates Raphael Warnock with a very small lead in this state that we know came down to just 10 to 11,000 votes in the 2020 presidential election, one where Warnock ended up winning by a very narrow margin in his runoff in 2021. And so we are all really, I think, expecting a very close contest in one of the most consequential presidential states, but also one of the most consequential states going to determine which party controls the Senate in November.
Absolutely. Mark, let's talk about, of course, what this really all comes down to, the voters and what they care about. You know, as we've seen this scandal sort of unfolding with Herschel Walker, it hasn't necessarily seemed, at least with the reporting our colleagues have been doing, to have made a huge difference to people in terms of if they were going to vote for him or not. What do we know about that now, and what issues do we know about these particular voters in Georgia caring about?
Yeah, Savannah, it almost comes down to the race on two different campaigns that Democrats and Republicans are running. And we're seeing Republicans across the country and also in Georgia run races where they are attacking President Biden's handling of the economy. They're noting inflation. They're talking about crime. Democrats are talking about a completely different issue matrix. They're talking about abortion. They are talking about threats to democracy. And, you know, the question really kind of comes down to which issue matrix is going to be more potent. Now, our polling ends up showing that still the economy really does matter when you add up both the economy and the cost of living to people. But it is striking to me this played out in Friday night's debate between Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker. It's playing out in all the polling that I've seen, that the parties really have two different issues that they're all kind of running against each other. And Democrats have their strengths when it comes to abortion and threats to democracy, and Republicans are playing offense when it comes to the economy.
Yeah, Mark, real quick here. Another former President Obama announced he's going to be visiting Georgia and Michigan later this month to support Democratic candidates in those states. Can you explain the role that he's expected to play as Democrats try to keep control of Congress here?
Yeah, it's very important party surrogate, Morgan. And, it is interesting. We ended up seeing President Biden hit the road going to places like California and Oregon. But former President Barack Obama is going into some of the most important battlegrounds, as you mentioned, to be able to go into Georgia, Michigan, but also Wisconsin as well. And we're going to see later this week President Biden go to stump for John Fetterman in the Pennsylvania Senate race. But it is striking to me that Barack Obama is going into more of the pivotal Senate battlegrounds as opposed to President Biden right now. And sometimes it's a whole lot easier being an ex-president than a current president. You're often a whole lot more popular, Morgan.
All right. So much more to come. Mark, thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark. We'll be watching. Now, while there are a number of issues candidates are pushing to get voters to the polls, two big ones are inflation and the January 6th investigation.
Meet the Press moderator Chuck Todd discussed those topics with his guests this weekend. And here's some highlights on this week's Meet the Press Compressed.
We have a majority of economists now that believe a recession in the next 12 months is likely. First of all, do you think the Federal Reserve is currently helping or hurting the situation?
I think they're hurting the situation. I think that it is wrong to be saying that the way we're going to deal with inflation is by lowering wages and increasing unemployment. That is not what we should be doing. So this inflation thing is a real issue. It is a global issue. But at a time when working families are struggling and the people on top are doing phenomenally well, I don't think you go after working people.
If you serve all 6 years, the entire time you're in the Senate, you will not join either party's caucus, giving them officially your vote.
No, Chuck, I will not. I will maintain my independence. I will not caucus with either side. And by the way, Chuck, I think that this will give Utah added value of influence in the Senate that it just doesn't have. I think that we've seen well enough over the past year or two, especially, that the senators in the chamber who are willing to act with greater independence, serving their constituents, standing up to party bosses, standing up to extremist factions and special interest groups, they have the most influence in the chamber. They're more influential, I think, even than the party bosses. And I want that for Utah, and I know we'll do a great deal of good with it, serving this way.
Are we going to see this report? No, we're not going to see the report before Election Day now, and we can have a debate about whether the voters should sort of see this before Election Day. But are we going to see a report before the end of the calendar year? I mean, you're under a clock here, so I assume you have to turn in something to us, right?
You will see a report before the end of the calendar year, but let me just say that this isn't about the next election this fall. This is about whether the sanctity of American elections here on out will be marred with violence and with fraud, because in a case where that happened, these people were not held accountable. And so that's the purpose of this committee, is to ensure that we tell the full truth, allow government officials to make changes to the system to improve our guardrails, allow the American people to make better decisions about who they elect, and also to allow DOJ to encourage DOJ to do their job.
And our thanks to Chuck Todd for that report. Still no word on when the January 6th committee will formally issue their subpoena to former President Donald Trump.
And turning now to the seditious conspiracy trial against Oath Keeper founder Stuart Rhodes and 4 of his associates. Today begins week 3 of the prosecution's case against them as the Department of Justice attempts to prove they conspired in an effort to stop the transfer of power following the 2020 election. NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley joins us now from Washington, D.C. with more. Hey, Ryan, always great to see you. So just tell us about these major takeaways so far, and what do you think we'll see from prosecution this week?
Sure. So we've heard a lot from the FBI special agents about a lot of the messages that were sent leading up to this attack. We've also heard a lot including from a former member of the Oath Keepers, about the quick reaction force that was kept outside of D.C. at a hotel. He said it was the most weapons he'd seen in one location since his time in the U.S. military, and that was testimony we got last week. Coming up this week, I expect more testimony from some of these FBI agents, and what we're sort of waiting on is some of these other cooperating witnesses in this case. There are a number of Oath Keepers who have already pleaded guilty to seditious conspiracy and have agreed to cooperate with the government, and we could expect their testimony coming up, including from one individual who says that he on the night of January 6th was in the hotel suite with Stuart Rhodes when Stuart Rhodes tried to get in touch with former President Trump and talk to some sort of Trump intermediary who had the president's ear. He never got directly in contact with Trump, but we've heard a lot about the open letters that Stuart Rhodes wrote in the lead up to January 6th, encouraging Donald Trump to call upon the Oath Keepers and help stop the peaceful transfer of power.
Ryan, I mentioned that this is the third week now, and we know prosecution is coming to the end of their presentation. Do we have any idea when they will rest their case and then we start to hear from the defense?
We don't quite know yet. They do have a lot of witnesses left. We might see this go into the next week after this week, just from the prosecution, and then we can see probably the defense take up their case. And what the defense is going to try to argue, many of them, is that they were some sort of protective measure, that they're going to basically say that they assisted officers in some scenarios and say that this was just a lot of basic bloviating and a lot of bark and not a lot of bite coming from the Oath Keepers, essentially.
The other thing that we'll be watching for is we do know that the Oath Keepers founder, Stuart Rhodes himself, is expected to testify. Talk about how pivotal that could be, depending on what we hear. And also, is that a risk?
It's definitely a risk, for sure. I think, especially for some of the other defendants, it's something that could go either way for them. He's going to take a very unique posture, I think, in this case, and essentially argue that he was trying to follow the bounds of the law and was thinking that he was only, if Trump invoked the Insurrection Act, was he going to do anything? It's a very sort of bizarre defense that we see coming forward, and he's done a media interview during the trial, which is also not something that most lawyers would recommend. Savannah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Ryan Riley, thank you as always.
And turning now to the war in Ukraine, officials say at least 3 people have been killed in a so-called kamikaze drone attack on the capital city of Kyiv. Multiple explosions rocked the city center early this morning, forcing many people to seek shelter. I want to get straight to NBC News correspondent Cal Perry, who joins us live from Kyiv. Cal, good morning. Just 1 week after Russia launched strikes on the capital city, it's now being targeted yet again. So where do things stand on the ground where you are today?
So, yeah, no, it was about 6:45 in the morning when we heard those first wave of explosions. There was about 5, 6 explosions and then a second wave about an hour and 15 minutes later. And the distinct sound, Morgan, of low-flying drones. They sound basically like mopeds. That's how people here describe them. That is exactly how they sound. There was another series of explosions, and it is an apartment building that took the worst of the damage. I can tell you this neighborhood has now been hit 4 days in a row. And they continuously are pounding the same area, looking and trying to hit these infrastructure targets. Now, the government had warned people that the Russian military was moving from these cruise missiles to these drones, but I don't think anybody expected the level of damage that we're seeing from these drones. The other thing that we saw this morning that we have not seen since the beginning of this war is people using small arms fire, machine gun fire to try to shoot these drones out of the air. Still a very dangerous situation, of course, because Morgan, these things can still impact in residential areas. And as the case was, we saw this morning, they start large fires and do a great deal of damage.
Yeah, the danger incredibly real right there in the city. Cal, we're also watching the fighting in the eastern Donbass region. It appeared to intensify as well over the weekend. Pro-Russian separatists who have been in control of Donetsk city since 2014 say Ukrainian forces shelled the administrative building over the weekend. What have we learned about that?
Yeah, and the heaviest fighting happening in and around the city of Herschel, as you said, in the south, what they call the fire line, the line of contact, as the government puts it here. 30 villages, we understand, coming under sustained bombardment from the Russians. It is these gains that are being made in the eastern part of the country and in the southern part of the country by Ukrainian forces that leads government officials here to believe it is why Russia is lashing out, using these cheaper but very crude and very deadly drones, firing them intentionally into residential areas. The theory being that Russia's trying to break the back of the civilian population. Don't expect that to happen. People here have been rallying around these strikes, saying it's only going to encourage them further on the battlefield, Morgan.
No doubt. Cal, I want to bring up another flashpoint location here. The Zaporizhzhia power plant has been cut off from external power yet again, according to Ukraine's energy agency. So what is the situation there for really the largest nuclear power plant in all of Europe?
It's a deteriorating situation, both inside the plant and surrounding the sort of surrounding area. Inside the plant, you have Ukrainian workers under Russian occupation being tortured and being killed. That, according to senior government officials here that we have interviewed. And now you have word that shelling has cut off the power to the station itself. So they've moved to generator power. The problem there is they only have 9 days worth of diesel fuel for those generators. They have to get the power lines back online, or you could have a serious problem at that plant, guys.
Yeah, serious problem, putting it lightly there. Cal, thank you so much.
Turning now to Iran, where at least 4 people are dead and dozens more injured after a fire broke out inside the notorious Evin prison in Tehran. That's according to state media outlets. NBC News has not yet verified the cause of the fire. It broke out overnight, though, and caused widespread panic in the neighborhoods surrounding the facility. Gunshots and screams can be heard in several videos recorded just outside of the prison. The outbreak comes as nationwide protests continue in the country. Sunday marked exactly 1 month since 22-year-old Masa Amini died in the hospital 3 days after being arrested by the morality police. Let's bring in Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis for more. He's a senior fellow and military expert at Defense Priorities. Lieutenant, good morning. Thank you so much for being with us on this. So I want to start just with some background on this prison. Tell us who's housed there and what's its reputation like?
Yeah, this is one of the more notorious prisons in Tehran, where it's actually a big mix of different things. There's just what they call regular thieves. There's economic violators, and then there's lots of political prisoners. In fact, some of these in the recent crackdowns that you've mentioned here have been housed there, and others, dissidents and filmmakers and others have been held there and tortured. There's been leaked video over the last couple of years, especially. It's been very embarrassing to the government. But by all means, it is a very terrible place to be incarcerated.
This all comes, of course, as violent protests in Iran continue. And we don't know many details of this fire yet, but we do know hundreds of prisoners were arrested during those demonstrations. We also know protesters showed up outside the prison as this was unfolding. Some of those prisoners are also U.S. citizens. How is the U.S. handling the situation?
Well, the United States, of course, is making diplomatic demarches, and they're demanding that especially any American citizens be actually released, but certainly taken care of. And actually, I have a particular source that has some knowledge of inside the regime that tells me this morning that apparently that this was a fire that was broken out inside intentionally to draw firemen in, and then they wanted to escape. Once the firemen came in, they actually had into a fight. They got some of their weapons from some of the security forces, and then they tried to break out. And then apparently lots of the supporters of these prisoners called the family members, and that's what you saw gathering there. Over 100 family members demanding that their family members be taken out.
As we mentioned, many neighbors reported hearing gunshots. You can hear them in some of those videos. I mean, this is obviously a distressing situation for the surrounding neighborhood, in addition to the protests that have been happening nightly as well. Protesters, as I just mentioned, also made their way shortly to the prison after the fire began, so that was happening outside as well. Are you concerned that this fire and then the surrounding activity could lead to more violence?
Well, yeah, that's absolutely the concern, because what you're seeing, especially with this Masa Amini situation here, that's already lit a fire under what has been a burgeoning upset and a protest movement within Iran. Over years, they've been upset with the regime, and especially since Raisi has come to power, they've tried to crack down even more, which is just not going to work, because all they're doing is inflaming the situation. And I think that things like this, especially when it gets about how the government has been, abusing their people, that it's just going to cause more outrage. And I think the regime is really in trouble right now.
Yeah, and we're certainly talking about it around the world as we see these images of these brave and strong women standing up for what they believe is right. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And now let's get a check on your morning news now weather, as parts of the country might be pulling out their winter gear.
Yeah, they might be. Meteorologist Michelle Grossman joins us now with the forecast. Michelle, good morning. Always good to visit y'all from Texas, because at least it feels like fall here.
Yeah, you get a little fall. That's
not bad.
Morgan, I was thinking of you this morning because you're going to feel like fall too. Even down to Texas, we're seeing some cooler air. You're not going to be freezing like some spots. Some spots are going to be freezing. Some are going to pull out the winter boots, not just the winter coats, because we're looking at snow falling, but certainly Texas will feel that fall coolness finally. So we're looking at freeze alerts. 66 million people impacted by a freeze alert, whether it's a freeze watch, that's in the purple. We also have freeze warnings. So it spreads from the Rockies to the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, portions of the Northeast, all the way down to the Gulf Coast states, the Central Plains as well. And here is this cooler. I do want to point out Dallas, 69 degrees. It's been so warm. We're going to be 9 degrees below normal today, 59 in Lubbock. But look at Minneapolis, 36 degrees today. That's 21 degrees below average for this time of year. Chicago, barely into the 40s. St. Louis, 48 degrees. And Pittsburgh, you're going to be chilly too at 50 degrees. So as we go throughout tonight into tomorrow morning, we are going to be waking up to temperatures in the teens, record lows across the northern plains, the Ohio Valley, portions of the Central Plains into portions of the Tennessee Valley. Chattanooga, 33 degrees tomorrow morning. The record there is 32. Aberdeen, 10 degrees. The record of 12 degrees, likely breaking that record. And Rochester, we're looking at 20. As we wake up on Tuesday morning. Then later on Tuesday, not going very far, we're going to see that cool air spreading into the mid-Atlantic, also the Northeast. New York City, 57 tomorrow. That's 7 degrees below normal. Houston, 69. New Orleans, 66. And Tallahassee, 68 degrees. Wednesday morning, another chilly morning. Temperatures in the 20s, the 30s. Austin, 38 degrees as you wake up Wednesday morning. The record is 39 there. New Orleans, 45. And Jacksonville, you're going to feel the chill too, 46 degrees. We're going to rebound slightly as we head throughout the later part of the week. New York City, 57 on Thursday, 62 on Friday. Raleigh, 62 degrees on Thursday, and back to near 70 degrees on Friday. So we do have winter alerts. That's for portions of Wisconsin, the UP of Michigan, because we could see up to 8 inches of snow. It's going to be that heavy, wet snow falling, and it's going to be breezy, too, with winds gusting up to 35 miles per hour. So we are getting a winter preview for sure in some spots. It's all due to this big storm system that's swirling near the Great Lakes. We have a trailing cold front that's going to bring the chance of rain along that cold front. So we'll see that storm system sitting over the northern Great Lakes. It's going to bring rain, wintry mix from Wisconsin to New York City. Then it doesn't move very far as we go throughout tomorrow. We'll see that system lingering into the middle part of the week. 35-mile-per-hour winds, rain, and the wintry mix continues. Where you see the blue and the pinks, the pink is a mix of rain and snow. The blue is snow. So we're forecasting anywhere from 2 to 4 inches in portions of the UP and Michigan, but certainly could see up to 8 inches of snow. And we're looking at snow in portions of the Ohio Valley, also western Pennsylvania. I think it sort of is that time of year where we're making that transition into the later parts of fall weather and also wintry weather. So the rainfall forecast also looking at heavy rains in portions of New England along the Great Lakes where you see those brighter colors. That's where we're expecting the heaviest rain. Also could see strong to severe storms in portions of the Carolinas, Florida, and southern Texas. We could see winds gusting up to 60 miles per hour. Back to you guys.
So what you're saying, Michelle, is that it's finally safe to bring the sweaters out.
For today, tomorrow, the next day. But don't keep the short sleeves far behind, for you at least.
Yeah, for you in Texas. Yeah, all right.
Michelle.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle.
Coming up on Morning News Now, China's warning to the world.
Yeah, the message China's president has for the West when it comes to COVID, Taiwan, and its global power. That's next.
Welcome back. China's President Xi Jinping officially opened the country's Communist Party Congress yesterday, and he's expected to be reappointed as leader for an unprecedented third term, which would cement him as China's most powerful leader in modern history.
And the week-long meeting kicked off with a speech from the president that touched on a host of issues, from security and Taiwan to the economy and COVID. NBC News foreign correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer joins us now from Beijing with more on this. Janice, good morning. Good to have you with us. So it does look like another 5-year term for President Xi. Can we expect any changes to the party's top leadership?
Well, no changes at the very top. Xi Jinping will rule undoubtedly for the next 5 years, and basically as long as he chooses, having disposed of presidential term limits back in 2018, paving the way for what could be China moving into uncomfortable territory with the degree of power that's going to lie with a single leader. By the end of the week, after these closed-door secretive meetings will see the Politburo and the powerful Standing Committee take shape. Undoubtedly, Xi Jinping will be surrounded by loyalists, people he trusts. We're not sure whether we're going to see a successor quite yet. Observers say it matters less about age now. It's all about loyalty. But all of these moves will be very closely watched, as was yesterday's address at the opening of the Congress. Xi Jinping mentioned security and safety more than 70 times. He pumped up the need for a stronger Chinese military, and he also warned of dangerous storms ahead. He didn't name the United States, but he did allude to tough times that face China with competition and the possibility of confrontation with the United States.
Janice, we know another one of the key points mentioned was the issue of Taiwan. What did she have to say about that?
Well, that's what got the loudest and most sustained applause of the whole address. His comments toward the end of his speech saying that Taiwan will be unified with the mainland. And it's not that that statement is breaking any new ground. That's long been the position, along with the warning that China would use force if it needs to, especially if there's what they call foreign interference from the United States. What stood out from how he said it yesterday as compared to, say, the speech he gave in 2017 at the Party Congress is that Taiwan unification was expressed less as an aspiration, if that makes sense, less of a slogan, and more of a plan, more of a statement of fact. So it's believed that Taiwan will be a central issue of this next term for him.
Certainly something we will all be watching. And Janice, also in the last couple of years, if we're talking about China, we've talked a lot about this strict zero COVID policy. Any signs that might relax anytime soon?
Unfortunately not. It's what probably most people in China were watching with this opening speech at the Congress. Everybody has been impacted. Every aspect of daily life is impacted by zero COVID, regular COVID testing, quarantines, lockdowns. The economy's been hurt. Youth unemployment is soaring. There's a property crisis, all of it being linked to this very strict and stifling zero COVID policy. He gave no hint in the speech that it's going to change anytime soon. If anything, he applauded the policy, saying that they can credit it with putting people's lives first. So if there are going to be changes, they're going to be very incremental, probably not enough to satisfy those who are weary of all of the restrictions and also weary of China being more isolated than it has in recent history as an outlier with the rest of the world.
All right, Janice, thank you so much.
And coming up, one step closer to loan forgiveness.
Millions of Americans can now apply for student debt relief. What you need to know about the application process and when help is on the way. Stay with us. We're back with the latest in that deadly mass shooting in Raleigh, North Carolina. Wake County's district attorney says she plans on trying the 15-year-old suspect as an adult in the murder of at least 5 people last week.
NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson spoke with the family of one of those victims as they try to come to grips with their loss.
For 35-year-old Mary Marshall, this was supposed to be the happiest time of her life.
You were supposed to be walking your baby girl down the aisle.
I was really looking forward to it. I couldn't wait for it.
In 2 weeks, the Navy veteran was getting married.
Him walk her down the aisle. It's a mother-daughter dance. And Rob was all she wanted.
Until Thursday, when an alleged 15-year-old gunman shot and killed Mary and 4 of her neighbors in their Raleigh neighborhood. Her fiancé, Rob, unable to forget the last time they talked.
She says, I need you to come home right now, immediately. Scruff, our dog, has slipped his collar, and I just heard gunshots.
Mary went after her dog. Rob rushed home to find detectives not far from their doorstep.
And he started asking about tattoos that Mary has.
And we knew right there. We knew that. We knew. We knew she was gone.
Rob now wears the wedding band Mary had planned to surprise him with on their special day. Inside, one final message from the love of his life.
the engraving is "You're my favorite place." I loved when she would wrap me up in her arms, and every time that we would cuddle that way, she would whisper in my ear before we went to sleep, "You're my favorite place."
How do you move forward?
One step at a time, together. Family.
Priscilla Thompson, NBC News, Raleigh.
Just heartbreaking.
And we know October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And according to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, an average of 24 people per minute are victims of rape, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner in the United States. And that's more than 12 million women and men over the course of a single year.
And more alarming, 1 in 10 high school students has experienced physical violence from a partner in the last year alone. Sometimes it's hard to tell if someone is experiencing abuse or how to help if they are.
This morning, we're joined by Crystal Justice. She is the Chief External Affairs Officer for the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Crystal, appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Of course. It's important to note, Crystal, that abuse can be physical, but it also comes in a lot of many other forms. So what are some of the different types of abuse and, most importantly, the signs to look out for?
Absolutely. So domestic violence is a pattern of behaviors that is used to exert power and control over an intimate partner. And so we often think of physical abuse, but abuse can be, of course, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, which is nearly universal for anyone experiencing abuse, and lesser known but very common is financial abuse, restricting someone's access to resources like money, having a job, even furthering their education. And then digital abuse, which is really the use of any technology to cause harm.
If someone's watching this right now, Crystal, and they are looking for help, what should they do? What resources are available?
Absolutely. Well, it's important to understand the warning signs or the red flags, right? If anyone is trying to isolate you, to keep you away from friends and family, to restrict your access, they're using physical harm, emotional abuse. Number one, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is here for you 24/7. We're a free and confidential service, and you're not alone. Unfortunately, millions of people in this country are experiencing domestic violence. And I think this month in particular, it's important not to just shed a light on the issue, but on how we can change the outcomes for survivors by giving them the best support.
Absolutely. And Crystal, I know it's a conversation that no one should have to have, but just to know it's incredibly delicate here. So how do you start a conversation with someone that you know or suspect is a victim of domestic abuse? And what's kind of the best way to support them in this ongoing battle?
I think as friends, family members, coworkers, we're observing things that tell us something's not okay. And I think just opening a conversation with someone to say, look, I'm noticing these things. I'm concerned about you. And really using open-ended questions. Is everything okay? If they begin to share their experiences and you are right in your confirmation that something is not right with them and that this, in fact, could be abuse, acknowledge their situation, acknowledge their bravery, offer to be any support that you can, and connect them with local resources. Ask them if they want to be connected with the National Domestic Violence Hotline or a local counseling center or a local shelter, and really just offer to be any part of their safety plan that you can.
Any offer can make such an absolutely huge difference.
Absolutely.
Crystal Justice, thank you so much.
Important
My pleasure.
conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. And now to a major step in the Biden administration's student loan forgiveness plan. The website went live over the weekend, and now millions of Americans can apply for relief. NBC News correspondent Kathy Park has more on what you need to know.
Morgan Downing, a master's student at Harvard, could be weeks away from watching her student debt shrink.
How much debt are you looking at right now?
Before the $10,000 of forgiveness, I was looking at $26,000. However, I do know that I have another loan, about $20,000 from grad school.
She says a high cost of education has always been a part of the equation. But now, for the first time, Morgan and millions of other Americans can log on to studentaid.gov and apply for debt relief. The Department of Education launched a beta test of its website ahead of the official rollout later this month.
The fact that I just submit and got a confirmation of like 10 minutes later It was just really exciting.
So who can apply? Individuals who in the past 2 years made less than $125,000 and families that earn less than $250,000. Debt cancellation can be as much as $10,000 per applicant or as much as $20,000 for Pell Grant recipients. This summer, President Biden announced a program which is expected to impact 40 million Americans. Republicans immediately denounced it.
If you owe money, as challenging as it is, you have an obligation to pay it back.
And now several legal challenges could put the plan in jeopardy.
If any of these cases do get considered on the merits, there's a significant chance that the president's plan will get blocked.
Applications won't be processed for weeks, but for many, the promise of relief is now in sight. Kathy Park, NBC News.
Our thanks to Kathy for that. And coming up, the dread of seeing those higher prices at the store has become an all too familiar feeling.
We're all feeling it. Just ahead, we'll take a look at the impact inflation's having on your budget and when we might see prices finally start coming back down. Stick around.
Welcome back. Let's get you some money news this morning. We've been talking about inflation for months now and wondering if we're heading towards a recession. So with no sign of things getting cheaper, where do we stand now? NBC News senior business analyst and 11th hour host Stephanie Ruhle walks us through the latest.
It's become an all too familiar refrain.
Everything is really expensive.
Every time you go and shop, a price of something has gone up by so much. It's insane.
Higher prices for just about everything. Rent, healthcare, food, groceries up 13% compared to a year ago. And while gas prices are lower than the peak in June, they've been slowly rising again.
I'm going to drive with a frown and a tank full of really overpriced gas.
Families forced to cope.
We're saving every way that we can. Instead of one grocery store, now I shop 3 every week, just trying to look for what's on sale.
With less than a month before the midterm election, voters say the economy and the cost of living are among their top 3 concerns, according to a recent NBC News poll. Republican candidates hammering the administration on the campaign trail.
We must change direction in Washington before it is too late.
The president in Los Angeles this week trying to reassure the country.
Things are still pretty tough. Even though you got good paying jobs and health insurance, it's still pretty tough. But there are bright spots where America is reasserting itself.
The administration considering proposals to try to keep gas prices from rising even more after OPEC announced cuts to oil production.
The price of gas is still too high, and we need to keep working to bring it down.
The Federal Reserve has raised interest rates 5 times so far this year in an attempt to slow inflation. But from August to September, prices still climbed. Compared to a year ago, inflation is still red hot at 8.2%. Normally, when the Fed raises rates, inflation goes down and unemployment goes up. That's not happening. Why?
It will happen. It's taking time, and it always takes time. We're just quite rightly impatient right now. The Fed is going to continue to raise rates. The Fed is going to try to get inflation under control, bring demand down, soften the labor market. All those things are happening just slowly.
With the Fed expected to raise rates again when they meet early next month, there are growing concerns of a recession at home and around the globe.
The worst is yet to come, and for many people, 2023 will feel like a recession.
The president trying to downplay the idea.
I don't think there will be a recession. If it is, it'll be a very slight recession. That is, we'll move down slightly.
As Americans brace for an uncertain financial future.
Our thanks to Stephanie Ruhle for that report. Now, as you just heard there, the Fed has made it clear that tackling inflation is its #1 goal. And to do that, it will likely continue raising interest rates. Experts say we do also have to be prepared for unemployment to go up.
Now to some financial headlines, starting in Oklahoma City, where Apple workers are going to start unionizing.
That's right. CNBC's Bertha Coombs joins us now for that and more financial news. Hey, Bertha, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Morgan and Savannah. Yep, workers at an Apple store in Oklahoma City have voted to form a union. That makes them the second U.S. store to organize. The workers are seeking to join a union to address concerns such as fair pay, career advancement, as well as health and safety issues. Workers at an Apple store in Towson, Maryland voted in June to join a union. Meantime, Sam's Club is raising its annual membership fee for the first time in 9 years, effective today. Fees now will increase from $45 to $50 a year for club members and from $100 to $110 for members of the chain's higher tier plus level. Last month, rival Costco, though, said that it has no plans, at least for now, to hike its membership fees. And small businesses are stocking the shelves early for the holidays this year and waiting to see how much shoppers weighed down by inflation will feel like spending. The National Retail Federation says November and December typically make up 20% of annual retail sales. But this year, small businesses are bracing for a more muted season. Consulting firm Alex Partners is forecasting that holiday sales will rise between 4 and 7%, which is a far cry from the 16% growth we saw last year. But I don't know about you guys. I set a budget. I say I'm not going to go over it. Then I find something that I think someone will really like, and out the window it goes.
You find it at Sam's Club, but then you realize you have to pay more to get into the club now.
Yeah, it's true.
A lot of stuff happening here.
Or you're like me and you don't do anything till the last minute, and you have to pay $1 bajillion to get there on time. Yeah, all that kind of stuff. All right, Bertha, thanks so much. Always great to see you. Now, if you're planning on flying for the holidays, get ready to pay up.
Yeah, I don't like hearing this. According to travel booking group Hopper, Thanksgiving airfare averaging $281 round trip, and that's a 25% increase from last year. And Christmas also going to give you some sticker shock. Airfare prices are averaging $435 round trip. That's up 55% from last year. Ouch.
Yeah, for real, 55%. Haley Berg, economist at Hopper, joins us now. Haley, good to have you with us to talk through this. So we know holidays are, of course, usually the busiest time to travel, but what's making this so expensive this year?
We're seeing incredibly high prices already. And keep in mind, they'll rise even more the closer we get to the holidays. There are a few factors. One is jet fuel. Just like gas prices are higher at the pump, jet fuel prices are about 88% higher than they were last year. We have fewer seats flying as airlines are still building back capacity coming out of last year. We're at about 86% of the seats available to book that we had available to book in 2019. And super high demand. A lot of Americans have not traveled home for the holidays in more than 2 years. So we end up with a perfect storm of a lot of Americans looking to book travel for the holidays, fewer seats available to book, and each of those seats is more expensive for the airlines to fly because of jet fuel. All of that is going to drive up prices even more from where they are today.
Yeah, everyone's having the same idea travel-wise. Haley, I'm curious, what's the best way to get ahead of the surge in prices? And are there any ways here that we can find just a little bit of savings?
Yeah.
Yes, the best way to get a deal this holiday season is going to be to book this week, actually. So this is the last week where we're going to see low prices and low relative to what's to come in weeks ahead. But book this week if you can. If you're not ready to book this week, maybe you haven't put in your PTO requests, haven't solidified plans, use something like the Hopper Price Freeze tool to hold the price that's available today and book it in a few days or maybe next week. We are going to see prices start rising by about $10 or $15 per day the closer we get to Thanksgiving and Christmas. You can't book today. Your next best bet is to be flexible. If you can fly Monday or on the holiday, so think Monday before Thanksgiving or Thanksgiving Day, Monday before Christmas or Christmas Eve, you can save about $100 or more on a ticket. So be a little bit flexible where you can, but if you're able, book this week because prices are going to rise.
As I just revealed, I don't do things this far in advance, so that makes me a little bit stressed. Haley, I do want to ask you about some good news. This is, I mean, hallelujah, because this is what we were dealing with all summer. I'm sure you were too. We are finally seeing fewer delays and cancellations compared to earlier this year when everything was a disaster. Why is that, and can we expect that good news to continue through the holidays?
Oh, we've seen huge improvement, especially in those delay rates. We're down to about 20% of flights delayed from highs over 50 and 60 earlier this summer. 20% is a pretty normal number for the month of October. But we're seeing improvements in part because airlines have proactively canceled flights. You know, earlier this year, it was very newsmaking. They trimmed their schedules for the rest of the year. And that was so that we would experience this relief by now. So fewer of those flights that would be causing disruptions are flying. So that's helping bring the rates down. But we're also in a pretty quiet travel month. So we typically see in September and October both lower prices and lower cancellation and delay rates. Unfortunately, that means that as we see demand pick up and more flights scheduled over the holidays, we can expect those cancellation and delay rates to rise, but not so much out of the usual. It's always a busy season at the holidays. We have inclement weather over the winter months. So we'll probably see the rates increase, but not as high as we saw this summer, those super abnormal delay and cancellation rates.
Yeah. Also, hopefully people actually get their bags with them.
Right. So booking Christmas travel in a few minutes now.
I know. I guess so. You're on it, aren't you?
Gonna try.
Haley Berg, thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Coming up, a different version of Where's Waldo?
Yeah, a new social media challenge is asking people to search for lizards. We'll tell you about this lesson. This challenge is hoping to teach people. That's next.
Welcome back. Now for the good talker. Hailey Bieber and Selena Gomez posed for pictures over the weekend to put an end to rumors of a feud between them. Stay with me, guys. The two were photographed hugging and smiling here at the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures annual gala on Saturday night. This, of course, comes shortly after Bieber addressed the years-long rumor that she played a role in Selena Gomez's breakup with Justin. And after years of receiving hate mail from her husband's fans, Bieber went on the Call Her Daddy podcast to clear the air, stating that is just not the case. Nothing like a good photo together. And I'm looking at the body language here.
Yeah.
This feels real.
Feels genuine.
I'm not gonna question it because those are real smiles.
Yeah, no,
right?
It's true. That is pretty big news, actually. That's been a whole thing.
No doubt.
Two of them, yeah.
Putting it to rest.
I know you were really read in on that.
Listen to the podcast. I can sleep easy now.
This morning, Morgan requested we share that news.
100%. 100%.
But it is good to see, especially because there was a lot of, obviously, intense mental health issues that both of them had talked about that came from it. So
That's
it's good
right.
to see. Yeah, absolutely.
Friends forever.
Yeah.
Well, it is a long-running puzzle that's been described as like Where's Waldo, but for reptiles, right? I've been wanting to see this. Social media challenge encourages people to look at photos and try to find hidden lizards. And while it's a lot of fun, it's also designed to make science a bit more accessible to communities who might lack access to education.
Absolutely. An important mission there. We're joined by the person who started it, Dr. Erin McGee. She's a herpetologist, which is someone who studies reptiles and founder of that Find That Lizard Challenge. Dr. McGee, good morning. This is so interesting and just so cool. I cannot, by the way, ever find the lizard. So first, just tell us how you got this idea and how it felt to see this kind of take off. People get really invested in it.
Good morning. So I got the idea when I was out doing field work. I am a Black woman in a predominantly white field. And so I wanted to show people that Black women can be herpetologists and get outside and do these outdoor types of careers. And I was like, well, I'm getting my PhD. How can I do this in a way that doesn't take away from trying to graduate, essentially? And so one day I'm out in the field, I see this lizard, it's running away from me, I'm running after it, and I almost lose it, but because I had already captured it previously, it had a bright orange 5 paint mark on it. So before I caught it, and I did catch it, I took a picture of it, and then I posted that to social media, and even though I got very few responses, I was like, well, actually, this could be a good way of showing people that, you know, these lizards are out here, it's a fun career, and that I'm doing this, and so I just kept going with it and I stayed really consistent. And it's been amazing to see the community that I've built in the last 4 or so years and how people just come together and really enjoy it.
Yeah, no doubt. And I'm still looking for the lizard in that picture, by the way.
That's what I'm saying.
Doc, I'm curious, how have you seen these pictures, as you mentioned, kind of get people talking about the bigger issues here, just outside of the photos?
Yeah, so a lot of the times animals and people, like people think that they're separated from nature, but really it's all one and the same. You can't be like, well, I'm going out into nature. You're always in nature just by existing. So like with some lizards, they might be experiencing habitat loss. And for a lot of people, they're experiencing like, you know, losing their houses. During the pandemic, we saw like a lot of people going through evictions and we had to have eviction moratoriums and things like that. So I could be like, yeah, this lizard is experiencing habitat loss just like people. people are experiencing lack of housing. And so I can make those connections that way from what we see going on in the natural world, which again is something that humans are a part of, to something that people can relate with in their everyday lives.
Absolutely. We've only got about 20 seconds for this last question, but I do just quickly want to mention the fact that you co-founded this group called Black AF in STEM. Tell us, what's your hope here with that group?
Really, I just want to see more Black people get into the outdoors, Black, Brown, Indigenous, people of color in general, getting into the outdoors, whether that's recreation or for careers, and hopefully making real changes in their communities from the natural resources perspective and not just environmental justice, but bringing the two together.
Dr. McGee, thank you so much. I read a comment on one of them where somebody said, I can't breathe while I'm looking for the lizards, which is just hilarious. We appreciate your time. Very, very cool. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
And that does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.